Turning 35 didn't feel like a milestone. Not in the dramatic way 30 does. Or the crisis-ridden edge of 40. It was a quiet number, solid. Grown, still young enough to run but old enough to know where not to trip. I didn't want anything extravagant. Just a small gathering, some good food, familiar faces, and laughter that didn't need explaining. So I decided to host a birthday party at home. We had done it before, house parties for friends, neighborhood cookouts, holiday dinners, but this one felt more personal. This was my day. I wanted the people I trusted, the ones who had stayed. A simple email went out to my colleagues from the firm, a few neighbors I'd come to like, and old friends who had managed to survive time and distance. My wife, Claire, was excited, far more than I expected. She took charge like she always did, but with more intensity, the kind that made her hum while scrubbing counters at 10 p.m. or spend 2 hours testing Spotify playlists labeled cool but effortless. "You only turn 35 once," she teased, tossing me a smile as she folded linen napkins we both knew no one would notice. She curated the guest list with me, sort of. I gave her names, she organized them by categories: work, neighborhood, family, then she added 3 more. "I was thinking," she said one night, "maybe we should invite Evan from down the block. He just moved in last month. And he said he's been meaning to get to know people." "Sure," I replied, "that's thoughtful." She scribbled the name down and added, "Also, remember Julian, my old colleague from the marketing team?" "Vaguely," I said. "Didn't he move to Portland?" "He's back," she replied, without looking up, "just for a while. Figured it'd be nice to include him." "Okay, why not? And also, Chris, my brother's friend. You met him once at New Year's." "I think I remember," I said, though I wasn't sure. "Yeah, sounds good." I didn't overthink it. They were just names, just people, and Claire had always had a generous social instinct. She could talk to anyone, knew how to thread the needle of small talk without it ever feeling forced. Still, something about her eagerness stuck with me, not unpleasant, just unusually sharp. She took over the menu, planned for more courses than necessary, bought the good wine without waiting for a discount. "You sure you're not more excited than me?" I joked. "Someone has to be." She grinned. "You're the least celebratory birthday boy I know." She wasn't wrong. I was never the center of attention type. I liked intimacy over noise, connection over ceremony, so the idea of everyone gathering under one roof, especially people from different parts of our lives, felt both comforting and slightly off-kilter. But Claire made it seem seamless. The day before the party, she had the house sparkling. String lights curled across the backyard fence. Candles lined the hallway in glass jars. The kitchen smelled like basil and roasted garlic. She looked radiant, not just beautiful, elevated, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. "You okay?" I asked, wrapping my arms around her from behind as she stirred a pot of marinara. "I'm perfect," she said. "This is going to be fun. I promise." And I believed her. I didn't count our SVPs too closely. I didn't notice who she texted more often during the prep week. I didn't ask why she spent an extra 30 minutes getting dressed when usually she'd be the first to throw on jeans and a tee for our friends. I chalked it all up to celebration. I thought I was lucky to have someone who cared so much about making my day special. And maybe I was. Or maybe I was just blind to the version of her that lived outside the edges of what I was allowed to see. The party was set for Saturday at 5. By 3, the fridge was full, the bar cart ready, the playlist queued. Claire double-checked the lighting, adjusted the serving trays, re-fluffed the couch cushions. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. The doorbell rang at 5:02. And just like that, the night began. People filtered in with bottles and hugs. Birthday wishes and the smell of cologne lingering in the hallway. Laughter came quickly, music slipped into the background. I floated between groups, smiling, joking, trying to soak in the joy without analyzing it. Claire was everywhere, refilling drinks, passing appetizers, throwing her head back at someone's joke. I caught her across the room once, whispering something to Evan, the new neighbor. They both laughed. She touched his arm briefly. A gesture too soft to notice, too intimate to ignore. Julian brought wine, gave her a long hug. Chris arrived late, with a small, neatly wrapped box. He handed it to her. "Thought this would suit you more than him," he joked. She laughed. I laughed. But inside me, a thread pulled taut. And though I didn't know it yet, though I still smiled and raised my glass and blew out candles with the illusion of a man being celebrated, I had already started to sense it. Not every guest had come to celebrate me. Some came to revisit something they should have never had to begin with. The gifts started as expected. A bottle of aged bourbon from my old college roommate. A novelty necktie from one of my team leads. A boxed set of historical nonfiction that, though thoughtful, would likely collect dust on the shelf. I smiled, thanked him all, posed for a few pictures, and dropped each gift in the designated corner of the dining room where wrapping paper was already beginning to pile up. It wasn't until halfway through the evening that something began to feel off. Claire was glowing. Yes, she always had a gift for hosting, her warmth, her ease, the way she navigated through guests with a smile that made people feel chosen. But tonight, it was as if the attention gravitated toward her, not in the way it should when someone is a great hostess, but in the way stars pull tides. Evan approached her first. I noticed him lingering by the kitchen island where she was laying out dessert. He handed her a small bag. Matte black, gold ribbon, "Just a little something to thank you for this incredible setup," he said. She looked surprised, but not entirely. "You didn't have to," she said, fingers grazing his. "I wanted to," he replied. I watched from the living room. Close enough to hear, far enough not to intrude. She pulled out a jar of handcrafted scented candles, deep lavender and something else. Muskier, her favorite. "Perfect," she whispered, smiling. A few minutes later, Julian appeared with a bouquet. Not the supermarket kind, long-stemmed lilies, wrapped in crisp paper with a handwritten note tucked into the twine. "These reminded me of that floral arrangement you mentioned at Sarah's wedding," he said. She laughed lightly. "You remembered that?" "Of course." She glanced at me briefly. I raised an eyebrow. Playfully, she mouthed, "He's just sweet." I nodded, still smiling. But a seed had been planted. Then came Chris. He arrived late, as always, but when he hugged Claire, it was long, familiar, 2 hands on her back. He leaned in and said something in her ear that made her eyes soften. Then, from his jacket, he pulled out a box. "Small, velvet. Open it later," he said, "just something little." She nodded and slipped it into her purse without even peeking. Later, I asked her what it was. "Oh, just a silver pin," she said, "nothing big." I didn't press, but my mind catalogued the moments like timestamps. 7:52 Evan's candle gift. 8:14 Julian's flowers. 9:03 Chris's mystery box. And what stood out wasn't that she got gifts. It was that they were the only ones she got gifts from. And none of them brought anything for me. Not even a card. They all said variations of the same thing. "For hosting such an amazing evening. To the woman behind the magic. Wouldn't have been the same without you." On the surface, it was polite, complimentary, gratitude to the one who made the night happen. But it was my birthday. I was the one turning 35. I had paid for the catering, cleaned the patio, sent the invites, and yet, they brought nothing for me. Only for her. Each gift was wrapped differently, but the message was the same: she mattered more. Or maybe, not more, but differently, in a way that stretched beyond friendly appreciation. Still, I said nothing. I smiled. I played host. I laughed when they toasted. I even clinked glasses with them, feeling the chill of something beneath the warmth. That night, as we cleaned up together, I asked casually, "Did you expect gifts?" She shrugged. "No, but it was nice. People are just being kind." I nodded, and something inside me shifted. Not quite suspicion, but awareness, like realizing the music playing in the background had changed without you noticing. Soft at first, then impossible to ignore. I went to bed that night with a full stomach and a tightness in my chest I couldn't name. And 3 unopened notifications in my mind. Candle, flowers, silver box, each one not meant for me. Each one handed over like a secret. After the last dish was washed, the leftover cake packed away, and the wine glasses returned to their shelves, I sat in the living room with a glass of scotch, letting the night exhale around me. The house was silent again, no laughter bouncing off walls, no music hum under conversation, just the residual warmth of celebration and a vague ache I couldn't quite name. I turned on the TV, but didn't really watch. I scrolled my phone, reread a few birthday texts, and replied to a couple of work emails just to fill the silence. But the thought kept circling back to those 3 gifts. The 3 men, the same peculiar intimacy that kept brushing the edges of my attention all evening. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. I didn't think Claire would do anything inappropriate. But there was a pull, something about the choreography of that night that felt rehearsed, like I had watched a performance, but missed the dress rehearsal. At some point, I remembered that the indoor security camera near the front hallway had been recording. We'd installed it years ago after a break-in down the block, nothing fancy. Just motion triggered, and mostly forgotten. I pulled it up on my laptop, not expecting anything beyond nostalgia. I told myself I just wanted to see the evening from a different angle, to relive the good parts. The laughter, the joy, the toasts. I didn't plan to scrutinize. But once the footage loaded, my eyes found patterns before I asked him to. First, Evan. At 7:53 p.m. He arrives. Claire greets him at the door. He leans in to hug her, and his hand lingers between her shoulder blades for just a second too long. Not obscene, not alarming, but unmistakably familiar. As he steps back, he touches her elbow, says something, and they both laugh. Her laugh is soft, private. She tucks her hair behind her ear, something she only does when she's nervous or flattered. Then Julian. 8:12 p.m. He's by the drinks table. Claire approaches with 2 glasses of wine. They clink gently. He leans in. She tilts her head slightly, his mouth close to her ear. She laughs, places a hand lightly on his chest for balance or warmth, or something else. At 8:38 p.m., a photo is taken. Someone else is holding the phone. Julian pulls Claire close, arm wrapped low around her waist. Her hand rests lightly on his forearm. The photo looks innocent, if you don't notice how closely their bodies align. Then Chris. He arrives late. 9:03 p.m. Claire meets him at the door. The hug is firm, 2 hands on her lower back. He whispers something, and she touches his cheek before pulling away. A fleeting moment, but real. 9:20 p.m. They take a selfie. Chris's hand is visibly resting behind her hip, not on her waist, lower. She doesn't flinch. She smiles into the camera, then reviews the photo with him, laughing at something on the screen. I paused the footage. My stomach turned, not violently, but with the heavy churn of recognition. This wasn't my birthday anymore. It had been a gathering. Yes, a celebration. But of what, and for whom? I replayed each moment, frame by frame, looking not for evidence, but for clarity. How long had this been going on? What had I not seen? I opened Claire's laptop. It was something I hadn't done in years. We trusted each other, or maybe, I trusted her. That night, I used the old password she hadn't changed, the name of our first dog and our wedding date. It worked. I didn't dive into her emails. Not yet. Instead, I opened her messaging apps. WhatsApp, Instagram. Then I clicked into her archived group chats. There it was. One chat labeled, Backyard Crew. I clicked. Dozens of messages, most casual, inside jokes, plans for dinner, references to movies I hadn't seen. But buried in the scroll was subtle, coded exchanges, flirty emojis, hints, words like, remember that night, and, your trouble, and, if he only knew. Some messages had been deleted. That made me pause longer than anything else. Because people don't delete messages in friendly chats unless those messages are dangerous. I found another chat. This one private. Claire and Evan. Then Claire and Julian. Then Claire and Chris. 3 separate conversations. 3 timelines. 3 different tones, but one unmistakable pattern. They were all more than just guests. One had messaged her weeks ago, "Looking forward to seeing you again, finally." Another had sent a meme about husbands being clueless. The last had typed, simply, "Same time next weekend." I sat there, bathed in the pale light of betrayal. Not explosive, not scandalous, but insidious, intimate, personal. And in that quiet, I didn't rage, I didn't cry, I didn't text her. I just closed the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and realized the party hadn't been mine at all. It had been a reunion. And I was the host who didn't even know what was being celebrated. There's a moment when scattered fragments stop being chaos and start forming a pattern. A moment when isolated memories, random gestures, and casual texts align into something undeniable. That moment arrived for me at 2:17 a.m. When I scrolled back through Claire's messages and realized the connections weren't incidental, they were rehearsed. Recycled. 3 men. 3 timelines. 3 stories she once told me in passing. Each dressed as coincidence. Each one a cover story. I remember the first one clearly. It was about Evan. She called me during a business trip to Chicago. I was in the back of an Uber, half listening between GPS directions and calendar alerts. The kitchen faucet started leaking again. She said, "I tried tightening it but made it worse." I offered to call a plumber, but she waved it off. "No need," she said. "The new neighbor, Evan, you know, the guy down the street, he fixed it for me. Super helpful, just walked me through it." I remember being grateful. "Tell him I owe him a 6-pack. I said, laughing. She laughed too. He said it's nothing, he's just glad to help. I never thought about it again. Not until I saw the thread. The texts, the photos, one of him in our kitchen, holding a wrench, another selfie, her in yoga pants, smiling, his hand hovering just out of frame. The timestamps matched, the night I was in Chicago. Then there was Julian. She met him on a charity event. She said, a local food drive. He's a marketing guy, she told me, really sharp, kind of quirky. We hit it off, just work stuff. She mentioned him casually, maybe 3 or 4 times over the year, each time wrapped in a larger story. He was never the point, just a supporting detail. Until I opened the private messages. Late-night conversations, Spotify playlists exchanged, a photo from the food drive, him with his arm around her. Mid-laugh, one message read, "Wish that night had lasted longer. You're electric." Her reply, "You make me feel seen." The third was Chris. She said he was an old friend from college. Small world, she had told me, running into him at that bookstore near the lake. She'd come home that day glowing. Claimed they'd grabbed coffee to catch up. Showed me a picture, just the 2 of them. Awkward smiles, steam rising from mugs. "It's wild," she said. "He used to have a huge crush on me back in the day." I asked if he still did. She smirked. "I'm married, babe, don't worry, but I should have." Because in her chat history, the tone shifted quickly, from nostalgia to flirtation, from, "Remember that concert?" to, "When can I see you again?" And then came the message that broke the code for me. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, to 3 different men, spaced out over the course of nearly 18 months. She wrote the same sentence. "You're not like the others. I trust you," word for word, each typed during a lull in the conversation, each positioned as a confessional, each followed by some version of, "This stays between us." It wasn't just betrayal. It was repetition, a loop. She wasn't living parallel lives. She was living one script, reused, repackaged, retargeted, and I had been edited out long ago. The realization didn't come with fury. It came with clarity, like finding the thread of a mystery novel and realizing you've known the ending since chapter 1. You just didn't want to believe it. I went back to each of those nights. The faucet, the food drive, the coffee date. Each one had ended the same way, with her smiling, me distracted, the house quiet. Each time, I had thought, I'm lucky to have someone who tells me everything. But she didn't tell me everything. She told me just enough. Enough to earn my trust. Enough to keep the story tidy. Enough to frame herself as honest, while she used the same line to unlock 3 different doors. And they all walked in, eagerly, believing they were the only ones. I wondered if they knew about each other. Probably not. But the cruelest part wasn't that they shared her. It was that they believed her. The same line, the same promise, the same illusion of exclusivity. You're not like the others. I trust you. And yet, they were exactly like each other. And I had been the only one who didn't see it. I didn't confront her. There were no dramatic ultimatums. No shouted accusations echoing through our kitchen walls. I didn't wake her in the middle of the night demanding answers. I didn't beg her to explain how, why, or when. I didn't tell her what I knew. I didn't tell her anything at all. Instead, I made coffee the next morning. Just like always. She stirred in honey and almond milk. Kissed me on the cheek. Said, "Last night was beautiful. Everyone seemed so happy." I nodded. Said nothing. The steam from her cup spiraled upward and disappeared. The house still smelled like candles and leftovers. The laughter still echoed faintly in the living room. But something in me had settled. Not with peace, but with precision. There's a kind of grief that arrives not with collapse, but with organization. I began with the gifts. I pulled each one from where they had been placed, the candle from the hallway shelf. The bouquet now half wilted on the sideboard. The small box still in her purse. She hadn't even unwrapped it. I did. Inside, a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a crescent moon. Elegant, subtle, the kind of thing someone would buy if they knew her taste well. I placed it back inside, wrapped the box in brown paper. Then I took out 3 blank tags. On the first, I wrote, "To Evan." On the second, "To Julian." On the third, "To Chris." Each with steady handwriting, each tied with a piece of twine. I boxed the candle with a note, lavender and cedarwood, her favorite. I wrapped the flowers carefully, preserving what little beauty remained. The petals still held fragrance, as if unaware of the decay to come. The gifts were not large, but they were intimate, and that made them heavier than any suitcase I had ever carried. I placed them into a cardboard box, nothing fancy. Taped it shut, wrote the shipping address in black ink. Her parents' home, a place she visited often on holidays. A place that once felt warm to me, filled with stories and wine and old photos on the wall. I didn't include a return address. Only one sentence scrawled across the top flap. Returning what was never meant for me. No name, no explanation, just the truth, quiet and sharp. I dropped the box at the post office that afternoon. Paid in cash, declined the tracking number. Then I went home, and began the second part. I opened the family group chat. A place once filled with emojis and recipe swaps and jokes her uncle would post twice because he forgot he already had. I scrolled through months of messages. Holiday plans, baby photos, schedules, photos of Claire and me from last summer, smiling on a boat. I looked at my own digital face and barely recognized the man. Then I hit leave group. No warning, no parting words. I muted her mother's number. Then her sister's. Then her brother's. One by one, I untethered from the architecture of her life. Not out of cruelty, but because I had nothing left to say. That night, we had dinner together. She talked about reorganizing the guest room. I nodded. She asked if I'd seen her phone charger. I handed it to her. She kissed me goodnight, and I watched her sleep, wondering how many versions of herself she had to keep track of to stay consistent. I didn't feel rage, only vacancy, like walking through a house after the furniture's been moved out. But the wallpaper still smiles. She had never truly been mine. She belonged to the parts of herself she never showed me, so I stopped trying to deserve them. And I started returning what was never really mine. One box, one thread, one silence at a time. People say birthdays are for celebration. A mark of another year lived. Another circle around the sun. Another chance to reflect on how far you've come and who you've become. But no one ever warns you what it feels like to unwrap betrayal in gift wrap. No one prepares you for the moment you realize you were never the main character in your own story. I used to think birthdays were about joy. Now I know they're about clarity. It wasn't the wrapping paper or the smiles. It wasn't the cake or the candles. It wasn't even the absence of gifts meant for me. It was the quiet, slow realization that the person I loved most had turned my birthday into her encore. And I had clapped along with the audience, not realizing the applause wasn't for me. In the aftermath, when the house was clean, the music silenced, and the inboxes emptied of wishes, I sat alone with the truth. Not an explosive one, but the kind that burns slow. A low, steady flame beneath everything familiar. She didn't belong to Evan, or Julian, or Chris. She belonged to the pursuit, to the rush of being wanted, to the soft lies of intimacy shared in low-light moments. She belonged to the thrill of secrecy, the validation of knowing she could still be chosen. And I was the stage, the structure that made her performance possible, the man who paid for the wine, who cleaned the glasses, who curated the guest list to include the ones who had already shared her. She didn't ask to be caught, because in her mind, nothing had been stolen, only borrowed. I was the only one who didn't know I was hosting a play. And when the curtain fell, I wasn't even mentioned in the credits. You can love someone with every corner of your being and still be invisible to the version of them that lives when you're not looking. I learned that love, without self-respect, is just permission for pain. I learned that silence can be louder than confrontation. That leaving doesn't always mean slamming the door. It sometimes means letting it close quietly, permanently. And most of all, I learned that not every gift is meant to be kept. Some are simply reminders. Reminders that you were never who they celebrated. You were just the occasion. She gave herself away to others under the guise of kindness. And they returned the favor with gifts, believing they were part of something secret and sacred. But what they were part of was repetition. The same script, the same smirk, the same lie. You're different. I trust you. The irony is, none of them were different. And neither was I. I was just the one who bought the cake. In the weeks that followed, I stopped replaying the footage. I deleted the messages, not out of forgiveness, but because I no longer wanted to live in a file folder of disappointment. I returned to the gym. I reconnected with an old friend I hadn't seen since the wedding. I learned how to sit in silence again, without fearing what wasn't being said. I didn't confront her, didn't explain what I knew, didn't offer her the chance to lie a final time, because I no longer needed her confession. Her absence from the truth had already spoken volumes. The last thing I packed before I left was a note I wrote to myself. It read, "Not every celebration is about you, and not every guest brings joy." I folded it, placed it between the pages of a book I once loved but hadn't opened in years. And then I walked out of that life. Not with bitterness, but with the stillness of someone who finally stopped hosting a party for people who only came to admire the furniture. The greatest gift I received that year wasn't a bottle of bourbon or a leather-bound novel. It was the knowledge that sometimes the most generous thing you can do for yourself is leave. Graduation cap lesson learned. Not every gift brings joy. Some gifts exist only to remind you that the person you love was never truly part of your celebration.